Tucker Carlson made one of the clearest arguments you'll ever hear for why AI will determine global power. And then he spent the rest of the monologue arguing that the United States should lose that race. In part one of this AI series, I showed you how Tucker convinces you of his position using fear as a political tool. Today, we're breaking down how his views on AI, coupled with his multipolar worldview, lead to a conclusion that contradicts Tucker's own concerns over AI. It all starts with Tucker's explanation for why AI is important.
You know that technological advantage pretty much consistently translates into geopolitical advantage. In other words, the strongest countries are the most technologically advanced countries. They're the ones with the most advanced economies. They're the ones who can defend those economies most successfully with technology, with tools, in that case, weapons. But technology makes the difference between first and second or 123rd on the global roster of power and wealth.
He's right. The most technologically advanced countries are the ones with the strongest economies and the strongest militaries, which is why both China and the United States are pushing to become the leader in AI. But even with that acknowledgement, he comes to the conclusion that we should cede the AI race, that we should not be racing toward the best AI, because, as we covered in part one, AI could be used by the government to spy on its own people.
And this really is the core problem with AI. I mean, there may be lots of problems. It could take off and develop its own desires and personality and enslave us. I mean, maybe. Hope not. But short term, the real threat, and by the way, it's possible that some people are highlighting the theoretical threat of AI becoming autonomous in order to cloak the more real and present threat of AI being used by the normal, middling IQ autocrats who occupy our government. Like letting John Cornyn read your email. That might be the real use of AI.
That is a fair concern. AI absolutely could make it easier for a government to surveil its citizens. But is the solution to that giving up on AI entirely? Or is the solution leading in AI while building strict parameters and proper oversight for how it's used? The answer is obviously the latter. Because, as Tucker himself pointed out, the leader in technology is the leader in the world. But according to Tucker, if you're in favor of AI data centers being built, then you're in favor of America becoming just like China when it comes to government surveillance.
With all of the nefarious concerns about AI, which outcome do you prefer as an American for your family? Would you prefer all of us that are developing these data centers put down our shovels and stop while the Chinese accelerate theirs? Would you like that?
Well, I see it kind of a different question. I see the question,
Well, no, you're not answering my question.
let me answer your question in the following way. Do I want to become like China in order that we can, quote, beat China? Not at all.
Of course, nobody is advocating for that. But Tucker wants his audience to believe that supporting AI development means that you want the United States to be just like China. That's an absurd leap. But Tucker treats it like it's the only logical conclusion, which is rich because his anti-AI position means we could step aside and let China become the most powerful country in the world. Follow the logic. If building better AI makes us like China, and the country with the best technology becomes the most powerful, then choosing not to lead in AI means that someone else will lead. And that someone else will be, in all likelihood, China. Which means the logical endpoint of his argument is that China becomes the most powerful country on Earth. The same China that he just railed against as a surveillance state. And if that sounds insane, it's not. It actually makes sense once you understand how Tucker sees the world, or more accurately, how he thinks global power should be structured. Because over the past year, Tucker has fully embraced what is called a multipolar world, a world where major countries share global power, where each one has its own sphere of influence over its region. Each country stays in its own lane. And if something happens somewhere else, you don't get involved because it's not your lane. So America handles this side of the world, China handles theirs, and Russia handles theirs. Here are a couple of clips of Tucker advancing that worldview from earlier this year.
Be real. A big power wants to control, hopefully in a non-brutal, enlightened way, but they want some influence over their neighbors. We can no longer be the sole author of terms, of commerce, of anything. We have to share power.
With China.
Of course.
Basically sit down everyone, okay, including Russia, China,
Iran and say, it's time for a new world order where we are partners in this relationship. Right? Before America was a hegemon, before the US dollar was a world reserve currency. But now what we want to do is open a dialogue where everyone is respected, where America is no longer the bully, but a willing partner in creating a new economic order.
I think that's the wisest possible advice and probably the only path that preserves civilization.
Now, this idea didn't come from nowhere. Tucker didn't sit down and reason his way to it. He got it from a specific source. Alexander Dugin, a Russian philosopher often called Putin's brain. Dugin wrote a book called The Fourth Political Theory, and its central argument is that the unipolar world, where the United States is the sole superpower, must be dismantled, replaced by a multipolar order where Russia, China, and the United States each dominate their own region. Dugin has been influential in Russian nationalist circles for decades, and his framework has real consequences, because it's the intellectual justification for Russia reclaiming former Soviet territory. Ukraine isn't a separate country in Dugin's framework, it's Russia's lane. Tucker had Dugin on his show. Tucker traveled to Russia and was impressed by grocery stores that were, I'm not making this up, no better than Aldi is. And he's been advancing this multipolar idea ever since. So that means Tucker wants to share global order with China. But he also just told you that China is an authoritarian country that is evil because it doesn't believe in Western values, a country that surveils its own people. And yet, he's fine with China having the best technology, which means he's fine with China having the strongest economy and the strongest military. It doesn't matter to him that China exerts influence more aggressively than we do, expanding their borders by taking over sovereign territory in the Pacific. In Tucker's worldview, that's just China's region. And to be fair to Tucker, Tucker probably wouldn't say that he wants China's values spreading globally. He just doesn't think it's our role to stop it. As long as we stay in our hemisphere, what happens over there is not our problem. And that was maybe a decent foreign policy decision back in the era of our founding, when it took a full month to get across the sea. The Monroe Doctrine was good for the time. Just focus on what is near us. Don't worry ourselves with the goings-on of Europe or Asia or Africa. But in the modern world, with modern technology, with the rise of AI, that worldview doesn't hold up. Because back then, the only feasible thing to do was worry about our own borders, our immediate area. But today, we know that it is possible to be the global power, and that someone will always rise to be the global power. But Tucker's multipolar worldview depends on China believing the same thing that he does, that global power should share influence, that no one country should dominate. Tucker assumes in a multipolar world, each power will be content keeping its influence regional. He may believe that is the best way forward, but does China? Is China fine limiting their reach to their region? With Russia, you could maybe make that case. Their ambitions, at least right now, are largely regional. Putin is focused on reclaiming former Soviet territory. But China? Do you think China is content being just one of several powers? Or that if China became the global leader in technology, that they would just stop? Do you think they'd be satisfied controlling Taiwan in the South China Sea? Or do you think they'd look beyond that? Because they already are. You've seen the headlines. Eric Swalwell and Fang Fang. The California mayor who was a Chinese spy. Chinese companies controlling the Panama Canal. China giving weapons to Iran. China close with Maduro in Venezuela. China takes sovereign territory from the Philippines. The point is this: China expands influence economically and politically and does it through espionage, not just in their region, but globally. That's the flaw in Tucker's worldview. It assumes restraint from countries that have shown no interest in being restrained. In his ideal world, it's fine if China is authoritarian, because they're far away. As long as they stay over there, it doesn't affect us. But that's not how the world works, and it's definitely not how power works when the technology in question makes it even easier to exert influence across oceans. He's worried about the US government surveilling Americans. But what about China using advanced AI to surveil us, our government, our institutions, our citizens? China, a country that does not share our values, a country that already operates a surveillance state, a country that has every incentive to expand its influence globally. That is the country his position empowers. The leader in AI will be the most powerful country on earth. Tucker knows that. He told you that himself. But at the same time, he's arguing that the United States should pull back from AI, thereby ceding power to the country that already attempts to spy on us without AI. His logic only makes sense if he believes that China's ambitions stop at its own borders, that China would be content just dominating its region. But that's not how China operates, and it's not how the world has ever worked. So what he's really arguing for, whether he realizes it or not, is a world where the most powerful technology ever created ends up in the hands of the very system he claims to fear. And that brings us back to where we started. Tucker Carlson made one of the clearest arguments for why AI will determine global power. But then he argued for surrender. The logic doesn't hold, and the stakes are too high to let that slide. Subscribe and like the video for more from me. And if you haven't seen part 1, where I break down how Tucker convinces you of his political positions, click over here to watch it. Then head to my Substack and subscribe there to get new releases emailed directly to you. With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you.